On our wedding night, Damien Wolfe told me exactly where I stood. "I know what this marriage is," he said, loosening his tie without looking at me. "My mother needed your father's connections. Your father needed my money. That's all this is. Don't expect anything more than the name." I said okay, because at 24 I still believed that if I was patient enough, kind enough, quiet enough, a person could grow to love you out of sheer proximity. I didn't understand yet that some men mistake your patience for proof they were right about you all along. For 3 years I slept in the east wing of Ravensworth House, while Damien kept the master suite empty in case Isla Renner ever wanted to stay the night, which she often did. Isla had been his fiancée before the lawsuit against his shipping company forced his mother to go looking for a marriage that came with legal favors attached. I was the favor. Isla was the casualty. Damien never let either of us forget which one of us he'd chosen first, even after he was forced to marry the other one. He brought her to my father's retirement dinner in a dress the color of a bruise and introduced her to the table as an old friend of the family. And nobody at that table believed him. And nobody said anything, because saying something would have meant admitting what kind of marriage I was standing. Inside, I stopped waiting for the phone to ring around the time I stopped believing decency was something you could earn through good behavior. The night I decided to leave, Damien texted to say he'd be staying at Isla's because she'd had a bad week and needed company. I read it twice, put the divorce papers I'd already had drawn up onto the kitchen island, and called a moving company for the following morning. I asked for nothing in the settlement, not the house, not the car, not a cent of Wolf's shipping stock. Just the clothes that were mine before I married him, and the small trust my grandmother had left me untouched. There was only one other time Damien had come looking for me in the East Wing in 3 years. I'd had pneumonia the winter before, a fever bad enough that Mrs. Abernathy called him twice before he answered. He stood in the doorway for maybe 10 seconds, told her to phone a doctor, and left for a dinner with Isla's parents he said he couldn't reschedule. I remember staring at the ceiling afterward and thinking quite calmly that I had married a man who would let me die of politeness rather than change his evening plans. Mrs. Abernathy, who had run that house since before I arrived in it, carried the last of my boxes to the car herself. At the door she paused and said, very simply, "It's about time, Miss Celeste," which was the closest she'd ever come in 3 years to telling me what she thought of any of it. I moved into a 1-bedroom above a bakery on Fenwick Street and called Adaeze Okafor, who ran the interior architecture firm I'd interned at before my father's company went sideways, and marriage became the family's emergency exit. "I heard you were free again," Adaeze said, like I'd been released from something rather than divorced. "Come in Monday." Within a year I was leading the firm's flagship commission, the restoration of the old Prescott Hotel into a boutique gallery space. I stopped flinching every time my phone buzzed. I started sleeping through the night in a bed that was entirely mine. Adaeze used to catch me apologizing for taking up space in meetings and would say, without looking up from her drawings, "Nobody in this room is waiting for you to make yourself smaller, Celeste." Until eventually I believed her. Across the city, Ravensworth House was falling apart in ways Damien hadn't accounted for. Isla moved into the master suite within a month and immediately gutted it, tore out the drapery I'd chosen when we married, and replaced it with something the color of her own vanity. She ran up his cards on jewelry, on a driver, on a designer she flew in from out of state, and when he finally asked her to slow down, she reminded him sweetly that she'd given up 3 years of her life waiting for him to be free. Damien's lawyer, a careful man named Grant, came to see him with the final divorce filing and something else he clearly hadn't wanted to be the one to say. "You should know what actually happened 3 years ago," Grant said. "The Ashford litigation that nearly sank Wolf Shipping. You've always believed Celeste's father brought that suit to force the marriage." "That's what happened," Damien said. "No," Grant said. "Celeste found the falsified manifests herself. She spent 2 months going through your own shipping logs before the trial and found the discrepancy your operations director had been hiding. She handed it to your defense team anonymously because she didn't want you to feel like you owed her anything. Your mother knew. She never told you, because Celeste asked her not to. Grant set one more folder on the desk. And Isla left for Geneva the week the suit was filed, Mr. Wolf. Not because her heart was broken. The Ashford family paid her $300,000 to disappear until the case resolved, so she couldn't be called as a witness against you. Damien didn't say anything for a long time. The Wolf Foundation's annual benefit was the one event of the year Damien couldn't avoid, and it was there, 3 weeks later, that he saw me across the ballroom in a green dress I'd bought with my own money, laughing at something Simon Vance had said. Simon ran the architecture firm, partnering with the Daisies on the Prescott restoration, and he had a way of listening to me that made me forget, for whole conversations at a time, that I used to shrink myself to fit inside a marriage. Damien crossed the room like the floor owed him something. Celeste, we need to talk. It's Miss Marlowe now, Mr. Wolf, I said. And I don't think we do. I know about the Ashford case, he said, loud enough that heads turned. I know what you did. I know everything. I know, I said. It doesn't change anything. It changes everything, he said. And for the first time in 3 years his voice cracked open in front of people who mattered to him. I was wrong. About you, about her, about all of it. Come home. I'll end things with Isla tonight. I'll sign over whatever you want. I looked at him, the man who had once told me not to expect anything beyond his name, and felt nothing sharp enough to call satisfaction. Just a door closing somewhere quietly. You didn't want me when you thought I was a burden you were owed an apology for, I said. I'm not interested in being wanted now that I turned out to be an asset. I already have a home, Damien. I built it myself. I turned back to Simon, who offered his arm without a word, and we walked toward the gallery wing together, while the party's whispers rose behind us like a tide going out. Damien evicted Isla from Ravensworth House that same week. Mrs. Abernathy told me later that the movers found 4 unpaid boutique invoices still in her name, addressed to him. A year after that, the Prescott Gallery opened to the kind of reviews that get read aloud at industry dinners, and I stood at the podium in a room full of people who knew me only as the architect who'd brought a dying building back to life. From the far side of the room, half hidden near the exit, Damien watched me accept the applause with an expression I recognize now for what it always had been. Not love, just the particular grief of a man watching something valuable walk away because he never learned to hold it while it was his too. Keep.